I was super fascinated, because we started in the old Ottoman parts, and then we went into the mountains, the real Montenegro. And then I saw a castle, and then we got to the coast, and it was the old Venetian part, I guess. So I find, like, Montenegro, it's sort of fascinating, right, because it's it's like a border between many different cultures with different histories. And, you've always been, like, managing these different forces, from outside. As Professor Acemoglu and I, we're often criticized for ignoring international relations, I have to say. And, why is that? I think, I think one of the reasons is that, whenever I've worked in a country in detail, like whenever I've studied a country and been and visited and worked and done research and collected data, and I've always been overwhelmed by the kind of dominance of the kind of domestic dynamics, or the kind of internal dynamics and the internal politics, and I think that's been true wherever I've worked, whether it's been in Latin America, whether it's been in sub-Saharan Africa. So I think there's a reason. I think these international relation mechanisms are kind of important. But let me give you an example. We were talking about this earlier. I was in Ukraine giving lectures in March, and by the end of the week, I was saying, okay, what's the future for Ukraine? South Korea or South Vietnam? And South Korea and South Vietnam both faced very similar threats. But the reason that one country responded and the other didn't was all to do with the domestic politics. I mean, let me tell you about, I don't know what the answer is to Montenegro, but, let me tell you about, some of the reasons in other parts of the world. I think, for example, in Bulgaria, what I understood happened in Bulgaria in the 1990s is that at the time of the transition, there was a sort of Russian-style mass privatization of assets, as advocated by Western economists. And those assets were basically given to kind of politically connected insiders, often the children of the people who'd been running Bulgaria during the Soviet period. And so a kind of whole class of oligarchs was created in the same way as oligarchs kind of emerged, of course, in Russia in the 1990s. And those oligarchs have an interest in extractive institutions in many ways, in barriers to entry, in maintaining their power and their perquisites. And that would be very difficult to do if you kind of had radical institutional change. So I think you sort of create this inertia in the transition because of what happens in the 1990s. So I don't know what happened in Montenegro, but I remember in Bulgaria talking to people about this problem, and there's that's the transition, but you could sort of say, Colombia never had a transition like that, but it's been very stable for a long time. If you look at Colombia's GDP per capita relative to the United States, it's been about 10% for the last 200 years, so it's, in relative terms, it's been very stable. Why is that? Why is there no attempt to kind of really build a kind of modern society in Colombia? And I think those two ideas, those ideas kind of work everywhere in the world, it seems to me, meaning irrespective of a kind of moment of a transition and whatever that creates, there's always incentives to keep the state weak, to kind of use it as a tool of politics, basically, to extract resources for private benefit, but also to use it as a tool of politics, employment as a tool of patronage, contracts as a tool of patronage. So that incentive is there all over the world, and not just in Colombia, but I guess also many countries in the transition have sort of fallen foul, if you like, of those sorts of mechanisms.